When I came to do my first Formula One race, together with my childhood dream, standing on the grid prior to the start of the race, and the grandstands shouting your name, and obviously because of Emo and my dad, and like that, I think hyped everything a little bit more. That was goosebumps, big time.
Welcome everybody to this week's F1 Beyond the Grid. I am delighted to say that we're being joined by Christian Fittipaldi. Christian, great to have you on the show. How are things?
Wow. Thank you, Tom. It's a pleasure for me to be here. I'm also very, very happy, and it's strange. Like, we were walking a couple of minutes ago, like in the paddock, and Formula One is very, very different compared to when I was here. And we hardly bumped into people that were from my days, and I guess we all get old. So
we did see Johnny Herbert.
Exactly.
You must have had some good scraps with him back
Absolutely.
in the day.
We raced against each other. Like, all 3 years I was here, 92, 93, and 94, and then he continued until 2000. From 95 onwards, I was in US, started Indy cars, and then from there onwards. But yeah, it was nice to see Johnny. We had a nice chat, and a couple of good memories also.
So it's been 30 years since you were in Formula One. Do
Are
you
you sure it's 30 years?
It doesn't look like
Okay.
it. Doesn't look it. But do you keep across F1 today?
Yeah, absolutely. Not because it's F1, because I'm a race fan. And there's no need to say that F1 is like the pinnacle of motorsports, and that's the second reason why I also keep track of it. And then the third reason is because I was part of the family also. And if you go back a little bit further than me, like when my dad was involved a little bit as a driver, and then afterwards as a constructor. And then Emerson, obviously, was the big highlight of the Fittipaldi family, with him starting early 70s and then all his success. And then trying to put together the dream with my dad was Emerson, after he had been 2 times world champion and 2 times runner-up, getting together with my dad and trying to run their own car, and in some ways it did work, in other ways it didn't work, but I can guarantee you something, they don't have any regrets.
You're talking about the Copasuca, obviously, aren't you?
Yes.
But it is a racing dynasty, isn't it? The Fittipaldis, the way you've just listed all of the achievements. I mean, you were only ever going to do one thing, it seems.
Well, it's, I would say, pretty secure. If you asked me what was the conversation in your house early in the morning for breakfast. So we had engine for breakfast, probably a chassis for lunch, and then a set of tires for dinner. Like, that was the conversation 24/7 at home, especially when both families were living together. I was a kid, and Emo and my dad and the wives were like, we all lived in the same house, so motor racing was the talk of the day.
How much of an inspiration was Emerson?
I think he was a big inspiration, no doubt about it, but it wasn't him specifically. I think it was the whole situation. It was him, my dad, then the Formula One team. I think the whole package was the big inspiration, but it's unfair on my part to sort of pinpoint. It was my dad. It was the Formula One team. It was Emo. Like, it was the whole thing put together that I think in a way inspired me. But at the same time, you really need to be on top of the game in order to be in the circle. And yes, the name opened a lot of doors for me and helped me, especially in the beginning of my racing career. But at the same time, there was a lot of pressure. I remember when I was growing up and doing my first go-kart races, when I finished second, I hadn't finished a good second. I had lost a race. And when I won, it was sort of, okay, he should be winning. Like, he's the son of Wilson, the nephew of Emerson. So naturally, he should be winning. He should be on top of his game all the time. So I sort of learned that very quick. And I tried to use the positives to my benefit as much as I could. And I sort of put the negatives to the side.
What is your earliest memory of Formula One? Because I saw a brilliant picture of you. I think it was Paul Ricard 1973. So what you were aged?
I think I had an elf shirt on.
Did.
Yes.
And of course, your dad was in the Brabham. Emerson was in the Lotus at the time. You were what, 3 years old in 73?
Yeah, 2 to 3. Yes.
Do you remember that time? Sort of heading to Europe and
No, I remember like when he was still in the Brabham days. I don't remember. I remember maybe at the end of the Brabham days when we went on vacation with Carlos' family. So because Carlos and my dad were racing, were sharing the car at Brabham's, and we were together a couple of times, but no, beyond that, I really don't remember. Then my best recollection was when the Copersucar was ready, and then I was playing in the factory and coming to the track and looking at them develop the car and the testing. And then I was a kid, obviously I wanted to push the car, I wanted to clean the car, I wanted to, I really didn't have any idea of how serious my dad and then further on my uncle was involved in or were involved in that project, to the point that when I went to school and the teacher gathered everyone and we sort of sat down, we did a big circle, and then she started asking, what does your dad do? And then one said, oh, my dad is a banker. And yours? Oh, my dad has a clothing shop, whatever. And yours? My dad has a restaurant. Then when it came to my turn, they asked me, what does your dad do? Ah, my dad has a Formula One team. And I answered that so in such a naive way, like I thought it was normal. I thought anyone could have a Formula One team. And it really, I started understanding how deep that situation was, probably only when I started racing cars, because up to that point, it was sort of shrugging shoulders, and it's normal.
I'm here to talk to you about your career, but just to digress just for a minute, the whole Copersucar Formula One team, I mean, what a project to do it from Brazil. You know, when you think back, it was everything else, all the other teams were in Europe, and you're doing it from the other side of the world. It was an very ambitious project, wasn't it?
Well, Tom, I'll just give you one example, and you're going to understand perfectly how ambitious that was. My dad used to order gear ratios from Hewland via telex. That's how complex it was. And
then Hewland in the UK?
Yes.
When would they arrive
Yes.
here in Brazil?
Well, probably 3 weeks later. So 2 weeks later, whatever. And then you had to go through all the bureaucracy at customs and trying to make them understand that, okay, it's for a race car, it's for a Brazilian Formula One team. And then you went to customs and they said, Formula One team, and started scratching their heads because obviously social media wasn't, well, we had zero of social media, so there were a lot of people that didn't even understand that we had a Formula One team in those days. Although the sport was already huge in Europe, it was growing on this side of the world, and one of the reasons that it grew was because of all the success that Emo had. But it was a challenge in the beginning.
I mean, it's an amazing story, as is Emo's story, actually, because, you know, at the time, who were the global Brazilian sporting superstars? There was Pelé, yes, and Emerson, really. I can't think, was there anyone else at the time? I mean, he was right up there, wasn't he?
There's actually a cool shot that they did for a cover of a magazine here. Emo using Pelé's shorts and shirt, and Pelé using his overalls, and they're both together in the shot. That's a iconic picture. Let's put it this way. But yeah, it was an adventure, but it was part of a dream that my dad had, a dream that Emerson had, and they tried to put that dream or turn it into reality as best as they could within their limitations.
Spark something uncommon this holiday with just the right gift from Uncommon Goods. From thoughtful gifts for holiday hosts to fun finds for kids and unique surprises for everyone, from nature lovers to foodies and crafters to collectors, Uncommon Goods has something for everyone on your list. I love how easy it is to shop by interest. Just choose a favourite activity or hobby, like camping, and you'll discover a collection of quirky camping-themed items, like a fishing pole campfire roaster or an Adventure Essentials survival kit. Or if you're into shopping for a family-friendly gift, the Camp Out card deck offers games to keep everyone entertained, and the National Park's Family Scavenger Hunt encourages families to connect with nature in a hands-on, adventurous way. When you shop at Uncommon Goods, you're supporting independent artists and makers and getting gifts that feel as special as the people you're giving them to. Don't settle for last-minute ordinary presents. Uncommon Goods has original, hand-picked treasures that will bring a smile to everyone this holiday season. To get 15% off your next gift, go to uncommongoods.com/grid. That's uncommongoods.com/grid for 15% off. Don't miss out on this limited time offer. Uncommon Goods. We're all out of the ordinary. Well, look, let's talk about you now. It's hugely successful in karts. You win the South American Formula 3 Championship. You then come to Europe, to England, and you race in the British Formula 3 Championship for the best team, West Surrey Racing, and your teammate was Mika Häkkinen in 1990. Talk us through how hard that journey is for a Brazilian driver to come to the other side of the world and to then have, one of the quickest guys in history as your teammate.
Yeah, it's definitely a challenge, let's put it this way, because it was okay. I had lived already abroad when I was a kid, but then it was my first year that I was living outside of Brazil. That was a little bit of I would say, a challenge, but it wasn't that bad because I'm not sensitive really to that. And then, as you mentioned, like having Mika as a teammate, he was on his second year in Formula 3. I was on my first year. I had to learn the tracks. I had to learn the whole system. Then driving the British Formula 3 was a little bit different than driving the South American Formula 3, especially on the tires. Like here, we used to race with Pirellis. There, we raced on Avons. They reacted a lot different. Pirellis were a lot softer over here. Like there was a ton of grips. Some places we went to, we almost had to treat them as qualifying tires. We went out of the pits, like did 3/4 of the lap really slow, and then past start finish, the tires lasted one lap, probably 2 laps at the most. And in England, like you started doing your lap time after lap 4, 5, because you had to bring them up to a proper temperature. But there's one thing which I actually mentioned to you yesterday, which was a huge learning curve for me, and I'll never forget, is until the last day I drove, which was in 2019, professionally I'm saying, Dick Bennett's taught me how to do all of my racing maps, and I was doing them exactly the same way he taught me, which he was a huge teacher for me. And it was exactly the same process. We worked the maps when I was doing F3 back in 1990 in England. So turn in, mid corner, exit, then the little observations at the end of at the end of the page, and it was pretty cool, and I'll never forget this.
He's a great teacher. What about your memories of Häkkinen? Just how quick was he back then?
Tervi moi moi. I think those are 2 words that he taught me. Then there's one bad word also he taught me that I can't say it on the podcast. But he was he was not only fast, but he knew the process because he had done it already for 1 year, and he had done it in a car that was worse than what he was on. So he was extremely fast. He knew what British Formula 3 was all about because of his previous experience. And on top of that, he was on a top-notch machinery. So when you put all of that together, like, he was the guy to beat that year.
So he won a stack of races. You won a race and got a whole load of podiums. Begs the question, why didn't you do a second season and try and win the championship?
Yeah, that was the big debate at the time.
I mean,
And
Lewis Hamilton did 2 seasons in
Yeah.
F3.
I think before we did a 3000 test in Dijon, and that was actually, no, it was in Monza. That was my first experience in a Formula 3 car, and that was probably in September. So we really had a little bit more time for us to make the decision. That went well. So then the next test, which was about a week and a half, 2 weeks later, we went to Dijon, and that went even better. So then my dad said, why don't we make the move and try 3000? And we had a great opportunity with Reynard. And initially it was supposed to be with First Racing, but then the team shut down for one reason or another. I don't even remember. And First Racing in those days had Apicella and Giovanardi, which was maybe not the best team, but they were extremely competitive. They were up there. Marco ran some very, very good races. And then that communication between First Racing, Reynard, ended up with Pacific. Pacific, in 1990, they were running Lolas. That didn't go so well for them. And then the next year, they migrated to Reynard's, and we had the package. Like, Paul Owens was my engineer, and another engineer that, together with Dick, I learned a lot from him, and he was a great guy, and he kept me honest. Like, the difference between, I would say, Dick Bennett's and him is that Dick taught me the way of how it needed to be, but I think Paul Owens was on top of me as far as putting the pressure on me. And he never went beyond the point, but he added the pressure as if he was my dad, but he wasn't my dad. So I think that was very good to me at the time. And we had a very, very successful year, and that opened the doors for me in Formula One.
You won the championship in 91. Do you think you were ready for F1 in 1992?
Wow, that's a good question. I wish I could have started Formula One in 93 and not in 92, but still have raced in 92 in maybe 3000 again. Because I was so much more comfortable in the car in 93 than I was in 92. It was a huge difference. And my self-confidence was a lot higher in 93. I remember me arriving in South Africa in 92, and I remember the difference of me arriving in South Africa in 93. And we ran extremely strong in 93. I finished the race in 4th, was almost on the podium with Ayrton and Alan. But I think the biggest difference was my mindset. Like, everything to me in 92 was new. And I remember when I did my first picture together with all those greats next to me, I said, wow, I'm finally here. Like, Nigel, Ayrton, Gerhard, like, all these huge guys are taking my first F1 picture together with me. And 93, it was different. Like, the respect obviously was exactly the same, but I was sort of shrugging my shoulders a little bit more and looking at it as a job. Like, okay, let's get this done and move on.
It's really interesting that you mentioned Senna, because of course, 92, your first season, he was at the peak of his powers, his fame was huge. did that make it easier or more difficult for a young Brazilian to come into Formula One?
I think it wasn't comparable because both Rubens and I started a year earlier than Rubens. I started 92. He started 93. But Ayrton was on a different planet pretty much. Like he was on a different stage of his racing career. We were starting. He was like sort of
The man.
the man, exactly. He was at his prime in those days. So it wasn't even a comparable aspect of it. He went on to do his stuff, and we went on to do our stuff like the best way as possible. But it's not that we were comparing this or that, because it wasn't comparable. He was on a complete different environment in those days.
Was he welcoming?
Yes, always welcoming, always every now and then went by and asked me, do you need something? Is everything okay? Any advice? But again, as I mentioned before, like he was taking care of himself. With all due respect, that's exactly what he was supposed to do. Like see what was his best option, and within all the options he had, try to capitalize as much as he could, either being a McLaren that he was driving, and then afterwards the Williams. So he was taking care of Ayrton, but every time he bumped into us, he was always forthcoming. Is it the correct word? Yeah. And always trying to be helpful towards us.
So the debut in 92 comes with Minardi, which is V-carb today. Now, I'm trying to think, the first time I went to Faenza was 1998. I was there to interview a young Argentine driver called Esteban Tuero. And my memory of Faenza is that it was really small in 1998. So what was it like in 1992?
It's hard for me to say if it was small or big, because I didn't have any comparisons with any other Formula One team. Like that was the first Formula One team, but they had pretty much a lot of infrastructure over there. Yes, it was small. There's no doubt about it, but they had everything. But it was still a little bit of a family, how can I put it, a family-run operation. And I remember in the beginning of 93, we sort of put all the sponsors on the car, and like the next day we were going to take the car to Misano to sort of like show it to the world, like this is our Minardi 1993. And that evening, before we went to Misano, Giancarlo's wife walks into the workshop, and then she looks at the car, and then she says, yeah, it looks very nice, but do you know what, Giancarlo? I think if you put 2 little stripes here, it's going to look a lot better. And she actually added a dark blue stripe and a yellow stripe to the layout of the car, like literally 12 hours before we showed the car to the world. And that was the layout that we ran the whole season.
I love that.
So that was the way things worked in those days.
That epitomizes the family-run team, doesn't it? It really does. Can I ask you, though, at mid-92, okay, you're halfway through your first season. You're gaining momentum. P8 at Monaco, great performance there. You then have this horrific accident at Magny Cours during practice for the French Grand Prix. How big was the accident? You then miss a few races because I think there's vertebrae in your neck are damaged. Just
third and fourth.
Just how much of a setback was all that?
Yeah, it was a pretty big setback, but I like talking about different times in Formula One. I remember it was starting to drizzle, and I don't know if I oversaw that. And I basically went into those quick S's that they have right in front of the pits, like on the other side of the grandstands, still in the same pace, and I should have lifted it a little bit. I lost the back end. stuffed it into the wall, and right next to where I hit the wall, completely backwards, dead on backwards. So gearbox went in first and absorbed all the impact together with my body. If I had hit like literally 5 or 10 meters to the left, I think it was, I would have nailed the tires, which that would have made all the difference in the world. But where I'm trying to get at is, as soon as I got out of the car, I saw stars, and I couldn't see the difference between the cars that were coming by, like if it was a Ferrari, a McLaren, a Benetton, because they were all race cars that were going by. And I remember, as if it was yesterday, I started moving myself and moving my neck, and I said, I'm fine. In probably a couple of hours, I'm going to be in the car again. Then they took me to the track hospital, to the track medical care, and as soon as I got out of the X-ray, like, they said, do not move. And they immediately put a collar on my neck, and then they flew me to Nevera Hospital, and that was it. But where I'm trying to get is, I got out of the car sort of 15 minutes before. I was sitting right next to to where I had my accident, and I was like moving myself, trying to prove to myself that I was okay, and I was going to sit in the spare car in the afternoon. And right when I went to the medical center, they said, "Oops, game over for you."
So you weren't in pain?
No, I wasn't. I was just confused. Like, as I mentioned, I was seeing a lot of stars, and I was seeing the cars go by, but I couldn't tell the difference between one car and the other.
So you missed the next few races. How difficult was the recuperation, and to see Alex Zanardi in your car?
That was a little bit of, I would say, it's very easy for us to analyze now what I should have done and what I didn't do. But I think I came back a little bit too early. My neck wasn't strong enough. I wasn't ready. I struggled. Yes, I did. I didn't qualify the first race in Spa. Okay, it rained the second day, so I really didn't even have a shot at it. And then I went to Monza, and Monza, it was really bad. Like, Monza, I wasn't fast enough. And
so your confidence had taken a hit as well.
Confidence, and my neck wasn't ready. Like, we just pushed it a little bit too hard. I think I was on week 4 after the accident. I should have waited at least 6 weeks, but I wanted to go back as soon as I could. And then I remember Sunday morning, like, Gianni had qualified, I think, 12 or 13. He had a very strong qualifying. In those days, you need to remember that we were running 30 cars. So he was like mid-pack, a little bit ahead of mid-pack. And I was outside of the race, and not because I had mechanical problems, because I wasn't fast enough. So then Giancarlo sat me down in the motorhome, and he said, "Yeah, we have a contract for next year, but unfortunately, the way things are going right now, I can't run you. I can't have one car starting just outside of the top 12, top 10, and you not making the show." So I said, "Yeah, okay, good. I completely understand your point." So then we went on to Estoril. I think I just made the cut in Estoril. I was 25th or 26th. It didn't look very promising. But then the race started. I did a race distance. And then the Tuesday and Wednesday, right after the race, we were there to test the new tires for 93 season, because we went to the narrower tires. And for some reason, during the race and during that test, something clicked. And
what clicked?
I don't know, because I had a strong test. I had a pretty average race, but at least I completed the race. I think I finished 11th or 12th, something like that. And then we went on to Suzuka. And when I went on to Suzuka, then it was a complete different dimension again, and it was back to normal. Like, I think I qualified 11th or 12th there, and I managed to score my first points. And I think I can say that maybe saved Minardi that
Well,
year.
you did, right? Because that brought them into the top 10, which back
Yeah.
then gave you the travel money from Bernie Ecclestone.
Which was pretty big in
Which
those
was
days.
pretty. I think you literally did save the team. Actually, I think you're right. I remember Giancarlo Minardi saying as much. Actually, but what a track to do it as well. You know, if confidence was the thing you were lacking straight after the accident, to do it at Suzuka is a real confidence track. So that must have really helped.
Oh yeah, Suzuka is definitely a very hard circuit and difficult to absolutely drive the car on the limit over there. It seems that every lap that you do at that place, you're always thinking in the back of your mind, I can go faster here. I can brake a little bit later there. I can anticipate power down over here. So it's always a big challenge to race over there. Plus, I wouldn't say it's the hardest one physically, but it's up there. So when you add all of those aspects together and being able to perform at a high level, considering my machinery in Suzuka was a great pleasure for me.
This episode is sponsored by Liquid IV. For many of us, the holidays are a marathon of gatherings, travels, planning, and hosting. It's easy to get so caught up in it all that we forget to take care of ourselves. Whether you're at the office holiday party or finishing up a long day of festivities, staying hydrated is key. And Liquid IV is the perfect solution to keep you going. Liquid IV's Hydration Multiplier packs 8 essential vitamins and nutrients and 3 times the electrolytes of leading sports drinks, with no artificial sweeteners in sight. They come in convenient, easy-to-carry packets, so all you need to do is tear, pour, and enjoy with 16 ounces of water for instant hydration. Choose from a variety of true-to-fruit flavors, and if you're sugar conscious, you'll love their refreshing sugar-free flavors like raspberry melon and green grape. Liquid IV is more than just a drink. It's scientifically formulated to hydrate better than water alone. It's non-GMO, vegan, gluten-free, dairy-free, and soy-free, so you can feel great about what you're drinking. Remember, tear, pour, live more. Stay hydrated throughout the holidays with Liquid IV. Get 20% off your first order of Liquid IV when you go to liquidiv.com and use the code GRID at checkout. That's 20% off your first order when you shop Better Hydration today using the promo code GRID at liquidiv.com. This episode is sponsored by Shopify. When you think of a brand like Allbirds, what comes to mind? Iconic products, sleek branding, brilliant marketing, but there's something powerful behind the scenes that often goes unnoticed. The engine that powers their success. For millions of companies worldwide, that behind-the-scenes force is Shopify. Nobody does selling better than Shopify. It's the home of the #1 checkout experience on the planet. And here's the not-so-secret secret. ShopPay helps boost conversions by up to 50%. That's not just fewer abandoned carts. It's about transforming maybe later into buy now faster than ever. Here's the thing. If you're serious about scaling up, your commerce platform must be able to meet your customers wherever they are. Whether they're scrolling through their social feeds, shopping on your website, or popping by your store, Shopify helps you sell wherever they're buying. It's no secret. Businesses that want to grow with Shopify. Upgrade your business and get the same checkout Allbirds uses. Sign up for your $1 per month trial period at shopify.com/beyondthegrid, all lowercase. Go to shopify.com/beyondthegrid to upgrade your selling today. Shopify.com/beyondthegrid. And it must have given you a real boost ahead of 93 because you get rid of the V12 Lamborghini and you take on a V8 Cosworth. You must have been quite hopeful for the 93
Oh,
season.
absolutely. Yes, and then Aldo was very good.
So that's Aldo Costa, isn't it? Who went on
Oh,
Ferrari fame,
exactly,
Mercedes fame.
Mercedes and everything. So he definitely knew his stuff back in those days. And then we had Gustav Brunner join us. And Gustav was my race engineer. And that car worked very well. It's a shame that we were sort of completely up to, I would say, zero in like the team's bank account to be able to develop the car. I think if we had money to develop that car, it would have finished probably like on the podium 1 or 2 times that year because we started very strong. Like
Well, as you said earlier, P4 in South Africa.
P4 in South
can
Africa.
Can I ask you one question
Yeah.
about that South African Grand Prix? In that, of course, 1993 was the peak technology with all of the active ride suspension and things like that. Now, I read somewhere that your active ride on the Minardi wasn't so good. In fact, maybe didn't even exist. And did you burn your bum so
Yeah.
badly in that race?
Wow, how do you know that?
Is this true?
Yeah, it is.
You've
No, but
you've still got scars today. Is
I
what
do.
I was told.
I do. Like it's not. It's a little bit underneath my bum. I would say on the high side of my leg, on the upper side of my leg. But it was, the car ran very, very low, and then it was bottoming a lot, and the seat belt started getting warm, sort of in the middle of the race. And what are you going to do? You're going to call them or call the team, like you're going to telephone them on the radio and say, hey, my bum is pretty warm right now. I think I'm going to stop. Like,
But we hear that quite a lot on the radio nowadays, actually.
well, yeah, you do. But in those days, especially with the amount of cars running, it was, you needed to take every opportunity as if it was the last one that you were going to have, especially when you came together with a small team. And we ran strong that race, managed to finish fourth. And then I had a third-degree bruise, which I had to carry on 15 days later to race here in Brazil. So I had to do a couple of medical interventions to make sure that I was going to last the whole distance here, because it was hurting a lot.
Can we talk about racing in Brazil? Because unfortunately you didn't finish any of the races at home, but early 90s Brazilian Grand Prix, I think mayhem might be the right word, because there was so much enthusiasm for Formula One, wasn't there?
Yeah, I think there was a huge enthusiasm for Formula One, like especially all the history Brazil has with the series, and when you translate it down to, wow, nationally, like Emerson had a huge success, then the Copersucar comes, and then we had some other Brazilian drivers, not to talk about like Pachi, and then Nelson and Ayrton. So it was very, very big. And when I came to do my first Formula One race, together with my childhood dream, standing on the grid prior to the start of the race, and the grandstands shouting your name, and obviously because of Emo and my dad, and like that, I think hyped everything a little bit more. That was goosebumps, big time.
Yeah, and I guess, is that where you really feel the height of Senna's fame was here at home?
That's actually a pretty good question, because I'm going to sort of try and explain to you guys how big Ayrton was in this country. When Ayrton was leading the race in 94, and was he leading or was he second when he spun?
I think he was second when he spun, wasn't he?
He's okay. But he was challenging Michael. He was only a couple of seconds behind. He spun the car. He was out of the race. The minute or the second he was out of the race, there was a helicopter shooting the race. And I would say probably half of the grandstands walked away, as if they didn't care about the rest of the Formula One race.
What about Christian Fittipaldi? What about Rubens Barrichello?
Unfortunately, Rubens actually in that race, he went on to finish fourth.
I think he had a good race.
No, fourth or sixth, I don't remember. I retired in the beginning of the race, but that was it. Like that's how big Ayrton was, and that image I'll never forget.
Look, while we're talking about Senna, can I ask about Imola 94? Look, we know what happened there, but I would love to know how it affected you personally.
During the weekend or during the race, not to say that it was a very, very difficult weekend for everyone, because first Rubens had the accident on Friday. Rubens and I, we sort of like big rivals. We raced against each other in go-karts our whole lives. I'm a year older than he is, so I started racing cars a year before he did. But basically, he got extracted from the car. He went to the medical center. I went by, and he was in the medical center. They didn't let anyone in. And then I asked, I think it was Geraldo in those days that was taking care of him. I said, how is he? He said, no, he's fine. Maybe a broken this or that. So that's a big relief, because obviously you don't want none of your colleagues to have a situation that he's going to go south or anything like that. But I said, worst comes to worst, he's going to miss a race and he's going to be back with us. So I was back in business. Then we had a very, very hard day with Roland the next day, which obviously no one was far from expecting anything like that. Didn't even cross our minds. That was hard enough. And then Ayrton moving on Sunday, like I would say this was probably the worst weekend of motor racing or Formula One since the beginning of the sport. I don't know if
you may be right.
If you add everything together, Friday, Saturday, and Sunday.
Did everything that happened affect your desire to carry on driving?
Not there. I don't know why, because at the same time it was really tragic what happened both Saturday and Sunday. Don't take me wrong, but the show must continue. And I think that was the mindset that I had in those days, and a lot of other drivers together with me. Yes, it was a huge loss, there's no doubt about it, but we needed to move on. Where it crossed my mind and where it was really sketchy for me was when Alex had the accident in IndyCar in 2001.
2000, Alex Zanardi, we're talking
Alex
about.
Zanardi. Then when he was between, like, is he going to make it or not make it? And everyone knew that he had lost both of his legs. I started questioning myself. Is it really worth it? Should I really be doing this? Or shouldn't I be doing something else? For some reason, that really caught me. And in a way different to what had happened to Roland and Ayrton.
And what about being the pallbearer at Senna's funeral? How did that affect you? I mean, I was told there were 1 million people on the streets of Sao Paulo.
Yes. Yeah, it was the whole thing was huge. And Ayrton, I think, had the image of an immortal gentleman to me, someone that would never end his life the way it ended. And yes, he was going to go on to race cars another 5-10 years, whatever the number, and then he was going to retire. He was probably going to do something else or not do anything at all, and then one day he was going to be fishing in his farm and then have a natural death and rest. And that was what was in my mind, because he was so strong. He had that image of almost perfection that it never, I think, crossed anyone's mind that he was going to get killed in a race car.
But you carried on.
Yeah, we did. I think both Rubens and I, we never chatted about it.
Did you not?
No.
You never chatted to Rubens Barrichello about it?
No.
Or at the time,
we were always together, but we never chatted about the situation. Although we started like bumping into each other, like in go-karts and trading paint, and like ever since we started racing back in '81, but we never ever spoke about it. I think one of the reasons was because we were too young. We weren't mature enough to really understand the situation. And going back to what I had mentioned a couple of minutes ago, like, the show must go on. and we were just doing our business. We were just trying to accomplish our dreams, and we weren't looking at the big picture, like if it's really worth it, if we should really continue, weigh pros and cons. So we just strapped ourselves in the car and moved on.
And did you feel a huge pressure from Brazil to be the next Senna?
There was a pressure. I didn't feel it on myself, but there was a pressure, yes. But then I think it got diluted relatively fast because I moved on to the U.S. the following year, and Rubens continued in Formula One. So I think all the pressure went directly to him. Maybe if I had continued Formula One in '95, it would have been different because half of the pressure was going to be on top of him, half of the pressure was going to be on me. But the fact that I moved on to a complete different continent, to a complete different race series, like it was sort of like turning the page, and I never really felt that pressure, and for sure all that pressure naturally landed on top of him.
Now, in '94, you were with Arrows, having done 2 seasons with Minardi. You say you moved on in '95. Now, I have a question about that, because a little bird told me that there might have been an opportunity at McLaren. Is that true?
Yeah, Ron and I,
Ron Dennis.
yeah, well, probably he doesn't even remember, but we had a conversation. That was back in the Autosports award banquet. And then I remember as if it was yesterday, he wrote his telephone number from his house on a paper napkin, and he handed it to me, and then he said, give me a shout, give me a call. So I rang him, and I said, hey, I have a test driver contract for you, but there are 0 guarantees that I'm going to put you in the race car.
This is for '95.
This was for '95, yes. And then, yes, Ron, thank you very much for the opportunity, but I don't know if I can do it. And it never really developed from that point onwards. I don't even think I ended up calling him and saying, oh, thank you, Ron, but I'm not going to take it. Like, it was really important for me to be driving the races week in, week out. And I never did. And if you ask me right now, was it the right thing to do? I don't know. At the time, I think it was, because I didn't have any guarantee that I was going to be racing. Maybe I was going to move on to testing the first year, then the second, the third, the fourth, and I was going to end up being a test driver. I didn't want to be a test driver.
Except '95 was the year that Mansell came back, wasn't it, from the US to race permanently in Formula One in the McLaren. He didn't fit. You know, it's a well-told story. And after the Spanish Grand Prix, Mansell stops and the test driver gets plugged into the race seat. And were you thinking at that moment in '95, that could have been me?
Yeah, I'm not going to lie to you that it didn't cross my mind, but at the same time, was McLaren performing the way that McLaren always performed? Let's be honest. No, it wasn't, at least in that year. And then I also can't complain, because on the other side of the pond, like, I made the move at the end of the year, January, early '95, and 3 months later or 4 months later, I almost won the Indy 500. So how bad is that? Like, and then 30 days after I almost won the Indy 500, I was signed with Newman Haas, which in those days was one of the best teams over there. And my first contract was for 3 years, and then I re-upped another 2 years. So life was good over there. Yes, like, I lost my Formula One opportunity. I had lost the bus. There's no doubt about it. Like, it had gone by, but at the same time, I also generated another life for me in the U.S.
This episode is sponsored by Vanta. In a world where trust drives success, proving to your customers that their data is safe is a game changer for your business. Whether you're building your security program from the ground up or scaling it to new heights, having seamless, dependable compliance systems in place is essential. Vanta automates compliance for crucial standards like ISO 27001, SOC 2, GDPR, and more, so you can focus on what you do best, running your business. By saving you time and money, Vanta makes security feel effortless while helping you build and maintain that all-important customer trust. And that's not all. Vanta streamlines security reviews by automating questionnaires and demonstrating your security posture with a customer-facing trust center, all powered by Vanta AI. So join the ranks of over 8,000 companies worldwide, names like Atlassian, Flow Health, and Cora, who use Vanta to manage risk and prove security in real time. Our audience gets a special offer of $1,000 off Vanta at vanta.com/grid. That's VANTA.com/grid for $1,000 off. I feel we can't end the chat without mentioning one accident that just caught the imagination at the time. I think you probably know where I'm going with it. It's
yeah, absolutely.
Monza 93. I mean, Christian, that was a lucky moment for you. You do a full 360 as you're crossing the line. Talk us through it.
Yeah, like we started the race. I think Pierluigi and myself, we were running different configs in the car. I think I opted for a little bit more downforce, so my car came alive towards the end of the race when I had less tire deg than probably he did, and I think maybe he had a little mechanical glitch also. So I remember me catching him big time towards the end of the race, and with 1 or 2 laps to go, like I was right behind him and came out Parabolica. It was my shot. I said I'm gonna get him before the start finish. Like I was a lot faster than him going through the corner, and then as soon as I come out of his toe, or in England slipstream, he basically moved the car over. I think he was trying to scare me or something like that, and at the same time he lifted because he thought I was gonna get scared and I was probably gonna like lift it, sort of try to brake check me, and I was gonna lift, and then he was gonna get that 1 or 2 car gap, and that was gonna carry on until the start finish, and he was gonna cross start finish ahead of me, and it wasn't the case. So my front wheel hit his rear wheel tire. I was so lucky that at that point I was doing 318 or 320 kph, and when the car started coming up, obviously because of the speed, I had enough momentum and air that hit the floor that turned the whole car 360. And what I remember was it was a hazy afternoon, blue skies, but a little bit hazy in Monza, typical Monza weather. And when the car went up, a little film of my whole life crossed my mind, like my first day at school, a party that eventually my mother took me, my closest friends, some special moment with my family, my sister, my mom, my dad. And then I thought, if the car doesn't go all the way around, I'm probably done, because landing upside down at that speed, the roll hoop wasn't gonna cut the job. Like I was toast. So the car did the 360, and it landed on the rear tire. And the same time the car was coming up, my mom was going down in the garage because she was watching the end of the race, and she saw that I was catching Piero, and she said, "Oh, it's gonna be close. It's gonna be close to like it's gonna happen at the last lap." And something else happened in the last lap. It wasn't me overtaking him, and I landed on the 4 wheels. The car crossed the start finish. Believe it or not, I unbuckled myself, got out of the car as if absolutely nothing had happened. And then I remember me walking back to the motorhome. Giancarlo sat with both drivers, and then Piero looked at me and he said, "Oh, I don't know what happened and this and that." And I looked at him and in Italian I said, "Piero, lascia stare." Like I was so happy that I was alive, so happy that I was alive that I said, I don't even want to go into that. I don't even want to go into the details if well, I know I didn't screw up, but if I had screwed up or if he screwed up, whatever the reason was, I was happy that I was alive.
I mean, the footage is out of this world to watch. I find it hard, even now, 30 years later, to look at it. But, well, Christian, it's been wonderful to have you on the show. 3 years in Formula One. You then go and win races, as you say, in America and have a great career there. But how do you look back on your time in Formula One? Not long enough.
Yes. I think I gave up on my Formula One dream too soon. I should have insisted on it a little bit more. Like, I remember me talking to my dad in Monza '94, and that was even before we spoke about the test driver contract with Ron, and apart from the test driver contract, like that was with a big team in those days, but I had plenty of other opportunities to continue with a medium or a small team in Formula One. It's not because of the lack of opportunities. It was just that it got to the point that it wasn't really making sense. Like all the big teams had already ongoing contracts with big drivers, so really there wasn't a spot, there wasn't an opening. And then I remember me talking to my dad in Monza, and I said, "Hey, why don't we think about going IndyCar?" And in those days, IndyCar was going through like a very, very strong period. An example,
Emerson and Nigel
and Nigel, exactly. Nigel was there. I ended up driving Nigel's car 2 years later. So it was big in America. And I looked at my dad and I said, "Yeah, we always dreamed about Formula One, but you never know what the world can bring us. Like, maybe we'll go to America for 1 year and then we'll come back to Formula One." And that was the whole talk in Monza that afternoon. And yes, we accomplished that. We went to America, but I don't know if it's fair to say or if it was good or bad, but my first 3-year deal led on to my second contract, which was another 2 years, and then I had lost that F1 momentum, and the doors naturally closed for me, which is completely understandable. But at the same time, I had a life over there, won IndyCar races, then tried my NASCAR adventure, which didn't work, but I don't regret it. And then went on to have an awesome sports car career over there. Like, won Daytona 3 times, won the championship 2 times, endurance championship 4 times. So I can't complain.
It's been a great career. Well, look, thank you so much for coming on the show. Can I just end with our quick fire questions?
Absolutely.
What else are you good at?
I enjoy very much riding bikes, dirt bikes, mountain bikes. Like, to be more specific, enduros type stuff, which is sort of like downhill. And even with my age right now, I still do it, and I think that I can defend myself really decently.
Quite dangerous, that downhill mountain biking.
I know. I busted 5 of my ribs. I perforated my lungs. Like I had
career in motor racing, and you're still doing that. Okay.
But I guess it's that adrenaline rush that we as driver are always after. Like, I don't think it would be fair on my part to myself if I sat at home and ate popcorn the whole day and watched TV. I don't think that would be cool. So
You don't strike me as that kind of character. Which racing person, dead or alive, would you like to be stuck in a lift with?
Jim Clark.
Why, Jimmy?
Because everyone says that he was one of the greatest, and everyone compares him a lot with Ayrton and two other great drivers. So I don't know, curiosity. And naturally, I would think that you would ask me, what about your dad and your uncle? And my answer to you is my dad and my uncle, they were never involved in racing. They were my dad and my uncle. I never saw them as professionals, as race car drivers. Like, especially my dad. My dad is my dad. And another question that I always get is, who's your idol? And then I loved, like, when I was growing up, I loved Lolly, Carlos Reutemann. I don't know why. It always clicked. And then, surprisingly enough, they asked me, what about your dad? And I say, my dad is my dad. 10 times bigger than an idol. 1,000 times bigger than an idol. And that's something a lot more important than what we can accomplish with the aspirations of looking upon an idol.
Very well said. Who would play you in a film? And it's just funny, if you catch you at a certain angle, you talk of Carlos Reutemann. I think there's a bit of Carlos Reutemann about you, actually, when you just at an angle. But who would play you in a film?
I don't know. That's a good question. You tell me.
Answers on a postcard. Who is the coolest person in your address book?
The one I'm still gonna meet.
Like what you've done there. Look, the next question is, if you hosted a podcast like this, who would be your first guest? But you do, of course, host a podcast like this.
It's you.
Yes, and I've been on it. So
exactly.
I know the answer to that question, but
which was it? Okay, just a quick parenthesis on that one. Like, when you were on it, it was so cool. It was cool because everything naturally flowed. You and Michael bringing up all the stories, and you adding up to the stories, and bringing a different insight from Michael, because two different generations. We really enjoyed it last. And I'm not saying this politically. It was light. It was awesome. And
oh, thank you. I loved it. And it's you and Nelsinho, isn't it?
Exactly.
Nelson Piquet Jr.
Yeah.
So he has his own podcast. There you go. Quick, what? Tell everyone what it's called. I'm going to pronounce it wrong if I say it.
Pelas Pistas, so P-E-L-A-S, and Pistas is tracks, P-I-S-T-A-S. And, well, you guys can catch up with it on YouTube. And we always air the new episodes every Tuesday at 9 o'clock local time, 9 o'clock in the evening.
All right. Christian, thank you so much for coming on the show. It's been great.
Thanks, Tom. It was a pleasure. And all Formula One fans, thank you very much for having me over here. And I look forward to chatting with you guys sometime soon.